Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Authors on Mission podcast. So, start off today by pretending you were 14 years old, and in one devastating moment, you watch your mother's world collapse as she learns your father has unfortunately passed. The sunny Florida morning transforms into an emotional storm that will reshape everything you thought you knew about life, loss, and faith. But that moment didn't break our guest today. She forged into one of the most compelling voices in grief counseling and Christian psychology. Welcome to the Authors on Mission podcast, where we don't just talk about success stories, we dive deep into the crucible moments that transform ordinary people into extraordinary experts. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, Chief Creative Officer here at Authors on Mission, and today we're joined by Dr. Amanda McNeil, the velvet hammer of grief counseling, whose book, Overcoming the Overcast, has claimed the #1 spot on Amazon in not one, but 2 categories. And what makes Amanda's story incredible is that she's taken her deepest wounds and transformed them into a revolutionary approach that blends cutting-edge neuroscience with biblical truth. So, without further ado, Amanda McNeil, we're so grateful to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I'm honored to be here and to share my story and my journey as an author. It has been a roller coaster of a ride, as I'm sure you hear often.
Of course, definitely. I get that. Well, either way, though, it's really great to have you on the show. I know it's been quite the journey to get here and to get your book out there, but I think that you have a really powerful story to share here. And I gave a little bit of a hint in the beginning of this podcast. I'm wondering if you'd like to fill in the blanks for us a little bit. I know you went through a very difficult challenge, but you kind of turned it into something we can all learn from and benefit from. So how did that all come to be?
Yeah. So one part of my heart in the grief space is to help expand people's definition of grief. Oftentimes, I think we associate the word grief with strictly the death of a loved one. And while that is true, grief also is the emotional process of us adjusting to any type of loss or change or regret. And so when people ask, like, oh, you have such a grief story, I was like, oh yeah, I've lost a lot of people, but I've grieved a lot of things over my lifetime and had to learn how to sit in the discomfort that grief brings. So my story did start when I was a young girl, and when my father passed away when I was 14 years old, it obviously was a moment that broke me, truly. So it's interesting to say that you said, it didn't break you. It did. And the beautiful side coming through the other side of grief is that you can be rebuilt again. And in some ways you can be stronger than you were before, but because of what you've navigated and because of what you've learned along the way. Not that I would sign up to learn that lesson again, but I am grateful for the beauty, the strength, the resilience that it developed in me, and the capacity to sit in those challenging emotions with others as they go on their grief journeys.
Wow, it's really an incredible journey that you've taken then. And I do apologize for saying that, you weren't broken by it. Of course, it always is a challenging thing and we all have to overcome it. I guess more so what I could have said is that you, built up from it and then learned from it.
Yeah. Oh, and I wasn't offended at all. Please.
But you definitely have built an incredible thing because of this. It's, just wonderful that you've been able to pass on your knowledge and your experiences to so many others in the form of your counseling and in the form of your book. Yeah. That being said, though, I'm wondering which came first, kind of the chicken or the egg. Was it the counseling first, or did you decide to get your book out there before that? Which came first?
Yeah, definitely the counseling first.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So even as a teenager, I knew that sitting with others in counseling as a counselor was going to be part of my redemption story, because I remember feeling so alone and so isolated, as grief does, isolates us. And so I knew that would be part of my story. And as I sat with others, as I heard more stories, as I witnessed pain, as I continued to wrestle with my own and heal over the years, I saw some themes of need and some themes of questions that people would ask, especially people of faith, wrestling with these really heavy ideas of if God is good or if God is sovereign, why did this happen or how could this happen? And I think those questions are really honest when we're facing pain. And having gone through it myself, it instantly allows for a connection, and people are a little bit more open hearted to receive because while we can't compare one grief to another, one loss to another, there is something very validating about, oh, you know, the type of pain I'm going through. Oh, you know, the types of questions that I've had. And it makes it a little bit easier to connect in conversation, in counsel, and being there as people wrestle with some of the hardest parts of life.
Yeah, and I can only imagine that it's challenging to hear all this from other people. And if it were me, at least, my heart would break a little time every time I hear somebody talking about, their experiences. But I'm sure in a way it's also rewarding too.
Yes. Yeah. Thankfully in school, like our professors did a great job of teaching us like how do you separate your life from your clients? How do you have healthy work-life boundaries and coming back to reclaim your own life after a tough session? But it is absolutely tough and rewarding at the same time. You said that beautifully.
Yeah, of course. And I see what you mean by that, definitely. Well, segueing into the writing process of this book itself, something that I think a lot of authors will benefit from today because you do talk about challenging concepts, very difficult topics. It must be, you must have had a very compelling process to get it out there. I'm sure it was challenging to kind of, remember what you've been through and get your words out on paper. Would you have a specific strategy when you began writing?
That's a fantastic question because I definitely consider myself a non-traditional, like I took a non-traditional path to authorship. And yes, talking about such a challenging topic, weaving my story throughout. The book isn't my story, but I definitely make reference to certainly the loss of my father, navigating infertility, navigating change. It was a really emotional process because of how much this subject matter means to me. And so I say non-traditional because I knew as a teenager, a book was in me someday, somewhere, and I didn't know exactly what that would look like. And I have some brilliant friends that, some of them have invested in a course on how to write a book. Some of them have invested in book writing cohorts. And at the time of writing this particular book, none of that was resonating with me. But of course, the fears and the insecurities were holding me back. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. And I actually was at a counselor's convention for some continuing education. And one of the booths there was a company that helps people write books. And so just chatting with them, and they were like, oh, you're a speaker. I've been an onstage speaker for a long time in my career. They're like, we love working with speakers because every talk is basically a chapter in a book. And that's what clicked for me. I was feeling overwhelmed by the idea of writing a book, but I was like, I can write a talk, I can write a chapter. And so once I kind of had that revelation, it really freed me. And I was able to just focus on one section at a time. And some of it naturally flowed into each other, and my editor helped me a ton with that process. But that was really the kind of the green light in my heart of like, okay, I can do this.
That's incredible, and I like that you did mention that it was that you were a speaker that really drew them to you in a way, and I definitely see what you mean by that. So many authors, are able to take their books and bring that into the speaking world by, speaking more about their chapters or so on and so forth. It was great that you kind of did it the opposite way a bit, and I'm sure that both avenues promote each other in a way too. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And I think going through this process, especially with my editor, actually made me a better speaker because of the feedback of storytelling and how to arrange things. And so it was definitely a big growth process, but I absolutely see how they're interwoven.
Yeah, of course, of course. And well, you did kind of mention before that you did feel slightly overwhelmed by the writing process. You weren't as professional with it, a lot of as experienced in that area,
Yeah.
say, but that others had gone to classes. So, what kind of advice would you give to professionals who want to write books just like you have, but feel intimidated by that process?
I think what I learned for myself, and this is actually a lifelong lesson for me, not just with book writing, but book writing brought out a new dimension of it, is owning your voice. I often would compare my style, my voice, my humor with other speakers that I admire, and I finally had to learn the world doesn't need more of them. The world needs my perspective, and it's really rewarding after someone reads the book or after someone hears a talk and says that was exactly for me, or the way you said that resonated with me, because it's just affirming that we have to own our voice. And yes, we can grow in the craft, we need to study, there's so many resources, but we don't need to be overwhelmed by that or trapped in comparison. We can flow with our thought process, our humor, and there's a bunch of professionals in the book writing process to help you kind of hone that and make it more excellent.
I definitely agree with that. There are a lot of professionals out there who can help you. It's about building a team of people who can bring you to the next stage, whether it be, editors or ghostwriters or beta readers or whoever it might be. Sometimes it does help you to give that guidance. So I definitely agree with that, Amanda. That's perfect. So segueing a bit into Overcoming the Overcast itself, it did hit #1 in 2 Amazon categories. So, why do you think that is? Why do you think it resonates so deeply with readers about your
Mhm.
approach to grief?
So I don't have data to pull from. This is just my heart here talking. Um, I think I touched a unique category in the sense of blending faith with neuroscience, with mental health research. So it's both science backed, biblically based, and heartfelt. And there are many authors, I think, who do that, but maybe not many authors who blend all three together. And I know, at least in my work with clients, that's my population. That's what people are looking for, is I want it to be research based. I want it to be biblically based. And again, like I mentioned earlier, when we go through loss, we naturally have questions about our faith. And if we didn't go to school for neuroscience or psychology, we're not totally aware of what goes on in our brain and our body when we go through trauma, when we go through bereavement. And so bringing all of those together in a fusion, I think, is a little bit of a unique dynamic that I was able to bring through this book.
Understood. Yeah, and I think from what you've described, I can see how it is unique. Something that you've experienced in your life and something that others can definitely relate to. And also, of course, relating it to spirituality. You write a lot about how our view of God affects how we navigate such, unfortunate moments in our lives, the storms that you describe. So I wonder if you can give us an example, perhaps, of how wrong beliefs can maybe derail someone's grief journey.
Yeah, that thought that I wrote about is actually based on a study that was done by many different researchers, psychiatrists, neurologists, of many different faiths. And they were studying people meditating on different God concepts and how that actually grew or shrink different parts of the brain, which is fascinating to me, that the thoughts we think in our mind actually physically shape the organ of the brain in our body. And so, what they found was when people meditated on a harsh God concept, and this again is across many different faiths, but if we view God as vengeful, as unkind, as judgmental, the parts of our brain where we are able to engage in empathy and love and appear in our prefrontal cortex actually shrink. We have less capacity to engage in empathy and love when we are scared, or when we think that is how the creator of the universe views us. In contrast, those who meditated on a God concept of him being loving, kind, gracious, accepting, they saw growth in the prefrontal cortex, which is also connected to our emotional regulation and things of that nature. But that was just so fascinating to me, that different researchers of different faiths were studying something and discovered this dynamic that the thoughts we think about God change our brain. And as it relates to grief, those questions of how could God allow this, or where is God in my storm, again, I think are really honest that many people wrestle with and ask. And so if we are viewing God as harsh or vengeful or trying to harm us, it will be much harder for us to engage in healing with him.
Right, and I guess that has to go for anything in life too. I'm just kind of expanding it, about mindset, right? If you're seeing something as closed off and harsh, of course, you might see things more negative light in general, but then if you see it's open and accepting, the more positive light, and that helps you to recover. I can see just by the general premise how it, definitely resonates there.
Yeah.
But amazing that you're able to find such, incredible studies that relate exactly to what you're speaking of and reinforcing your points too. I'm wondering if you'd like to speak a little bit about the research process for this, because you really did embed, true research findings with, your own experiences and, tips as well. So how did that work for you? How was that research process?
Yeah, that actually was another challenge of the writing process because I wrote a little bit out of order. I wrote what I call like the fun parts, like the things I was passionate about, my story or client stories that gave me permission to share. And so I wrote all the things I was passionate about. And then I was like, oh, now I have to research what happens in the brain in depression. And it felt like going back to school all over again. And interestingly enough, some of the research that I used for the book is also part of my PhD dissertation. So I call my book like the fun version of my dissertation. Don't read my dissertation. Dissertations are boring. But all that research definitely went hand in hand. And so I researched what happens in the brain chemically when we go through depression. How does our brain respond initially to pain or to loss or to threat of our safety? Which, in my case, the death of a parent absolutely threatens our safety, our security, our provision, even the idea that, I'm going to live forever and I'm going to have a great life. We are just reminded how finite we are and how tomorrow isn't promised for any of us. So a lot of study there on what goes on in loss, the study, like I said, about meditating on that God's concept and what we can do to support our brain and honor our brain's process, that we cannot rush through grief healing. We cannot fill out a checklist or put a timeline on it or say it should only take this long or it should always look this way, that we have to be gentle because our brains are designed to protect us, and they do that really well, sometimes in ways that in the moment of protecting us serve its purpose. But if we don't engage it properly or we don't get the support that we need, that kind of self-protective mechanism can keep us from healing and expanding. And so we have to be mindful to take it one step at a time as our brain and our body tell us that we're ready for that next step.
This is perfect. And I love the way that you took the research question and you kind of took it further and now, just into those other bits of philosophy for us to take in with that. That was beautiful. I can see how that's something that you must do during your, one-on-one counseling as well, kind of taking what somebody says and then taking it a step farther. And drawing upon that, I guess I'm wondering, as you were writing this, was it a lot different than writing or speaking as you would to your general audience or your usual clients versus writing to people who you don't actually see? I'm sure that it was different to think of your audience in a different way as opposed to they're not in front of you, but they're going to read your book later on is what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, in that sense, it is a little different, but I think I'm the type of person, I speak professionally, how I speak even in this setting, which this is semi-professional, I guess, but I also write how I talk because another, this isn't a pet peeve, but I think another concern I had is oftentimes some grief research books or support books or neuroscience books, they're so full of big scientific jargon that to the average person, it's like, what does this mean? How can this help my life? I definitely don't know how to apply it. And I wanted to make this book really practical and relatable. And so I describe it as if someone's going through loss and we have 5 hours for coffee and I'm talking the whole time, here's my book. So it is infused with a little bit of humor, um, definitely compassion, definitely science. And it's designed to take people compassionately through the journey and recognize all the different colors and emotions and variety of challenges that navigating grief brings up.
That's beautiful, and I'm glad that it does cover such a wide range because, like you mentioned before, grief comes in many different forms. So that way, you're able to address the audience's concerns regardless of where they might be in their own personal journeys. So it's wonderful that you're able to do that. You don't know who exactly you're speaking to, but you're offered all the different colors, as you said, for everyone to latch on to whatever it is they need to hear. I think that's wonderful. All right, Amanda. Well, I just have to know, do you happen to have a copy of the book with you today?
I do. I'm biased. I love, love, love my cover. A friend helped create it. I think it's forward facing on your camera there.
Yes, it is.
But to me, it just is so representative of we all go through storms, and the light is always shining on the other side of the storm. So yeah,
It's absolutely beautiful, and I love that you did play into that metaphor there. I think that's definitely something catchy that get people's attention and get them to want to pick up the book and see, okay, what's this all about? That's beautiful. And you mentioned a friend helped you do it. Was that a collaborative process? They just kind of sketched up for you? How'd that work?
Yeah, so she's actually a professional artist in a completely different space. And when I asked her, I was like, hey, I know you don't do book design, but would you be willing? And so it was definitely a collaborative process, and I'm very grateful for that.
Definitely. Well, hey, you always need to reach out to the people you know and build that team. Like I mentioned, it's all about having a community of people who can assist you and make sure that you're getting to the best product you can at the end of the day. So it's good that you had that friend to lean on. So all that being said, though, I'm wondering what's next on the radar for you? You have the book out. You've been doing speaking engagements. What's next? I'm sure that your mission is not yet complete.
Yeah. It's funny, I actually joke with my own counselor. I'm like, I don't want to be the grief girl. Like, I don't want that to be the only thing I'm known for. I know I have a couple more books on the topic of grief in my heart, but I don't have a timeline yet. And another topic I'm really passionate about is marriage and helping couples have a healthy, passionate marriage, especially couples who happen to work together, be entrepreneurs together. Because when you wear multiple hats, it's easy to drift apart or become really good business partners or really good roommates or really good co-parents. But how to keep the spark alive, that's a passion of mine, walking alongside couples in. And right now, I should have done this earlier, but life, I'm actually working on the audio book of Overcoming the Overcast. So lots of people have been asking for it. So that's the present project, and still figuring out in my heart what comes after that.
That's awesome that you're branching out into other areas. I see what you mean, not wanting to be the grief girl, though you're really great at what you do, and you really communicate everything very clearly and resonate with your readers. But I see how you want to expand more, so that's a wonderful avenue to pursue. That being said, though, and what caught my ear there is audiobook. I think that's a wonderful endeavor to be taking on, especially because a lot of authors listening today might also be debating, should I make an audiobook, should I not? So I'm wondering if you'd provide us some insights. What made you decide to take that leap, and how has the process been so far?
Yeah. So I get a lot of compliments on my voice. They're like, oh, your voice is so soothing. It's so ASMR, whatever. And so I knew that I wanted to voice my first book, this story. And I think because I know where the inflections of humor are. And so again, it's new territory for me. It's unknown. And taking the leap, I struggle with tackling new things when I feel like not perfect or not prepared. I call myself a recovering perfectionist. So diving into the world of becoming an author, diving into my PhD process, all of this is so much unknown. Just being a business owner, you're figuring things out all the time. And so audiobook is just yet another unknown, but so far it's been easier than I thought it would be, which is kind of like my life lesson, Amanda, stop overthinking and just start doing.
I like that. Don't just stop thinking and start doing. It's a great advice for anybody, whether it be starting your audiobook or starting the writing process or whatever it might be in our lives. It's beautiful stuff. So people have been inspired by you today. They heard what you have to say. They want to learn more about your book and more about you and stay up to date. How can they stay connected with you? Where can they find you online and get in touch?
Yeah, so I am found at amandacmcneil.com. That's my name with my middle initial. All my books are there, podcasts are there, and same on Instagram. I'm not cool enough for TikTok, sorry, maybe one day, but Amanda C. McNeil on Instagram. And my husband and I have a coaching practice at mcneilcoaching.com.
I love that. Well, we're going to put all the links in the description box today. I love that you have with your husband too. That's a great team collaboration. They're very cute.
Yeah, I'm biased, but I'm like, he's the best coworker.
Well, hey, you'll always be able to hang out with him, but also helping people along the way too. What's better than that?
Yep.
So yeah, we put the links to those in the description box of the podcast today, everybody. So go ahead and click on over, check them out, find out a little bit more about Dr. Amanda McNeil. And Amanda, I'm wondering, we're starting to wrap up the conversation, but what pieces of advice do you have left to offer our audience today as they depart? I'm wondering if you have perhaps one bit of advice about grief in particular, and then of course, to wrap it up, anything about the writing process.
Yeah. Well, grief is such a large topic. But I would say if you yourself are navigating grief, learning how to be gentle with yourself is such a gift. And actually, I would say the same advice if you're loving and supporting someone who's going through grief. Oftentimes, I think we expect ourselves to live life at a normal pace or to bounce back. And it's like the equivalent of, if I ran a 10-minute mile, that was my pacing and running was my passion, and then I break my leg, expecting myself to still hit a 10-minute mile in a cast is setting myself up for failure. And so when we expect ourselves to operate the same, to think the same, to push the same, we get really frustrated with ourselves. And so engaging with our grief is the only way to heal it, to work through it. We can't ignore it or just hope that time heals all wounds. We actually do have to engage our grief, and we will eventually get back to that 10-minute pace. But it usually takes a little longer than we want it to.
Understand, yes. So you have to be adaptive and flexible with yourself and be willing to make those accommodations. Like, you can't run that 10-minute mile. You have to make yourself take breaks and take it easy and grow with the process, I guess you could say.
Yep.
And how about some last writing tips? Any pieces of homework that you want to leave our writers with tonight?
Ooh, homework. I love homework, giving homework in sessions. Not everybody is receiving it. I would say for writers, one thing that helped me was to go where the grace is. So if I was feeling energy on something, I would run with it. And again, being a recovering perfectionist, try not to let myself get so hung up on, is this in the right chapter? Did I say everything I needed to say? Like, just get it out. And you can worry about the organization piece later in other drafts or with the help of an editor or a friend, or like you said earlier, some beta readers. You have time to figure out how to organize it, but go where the grace is, get it all out. And the process is messy. And for my recovering perfectionists, it's supposed to be that way, and it'll make you better.
That's beautiful. I love that. Perfect stuff. Well, hey, it's been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you coming on today. I think we've learned a ton from you today. I think if your story really does show us that even though we go through hard times, it can turn us into something incredible, allowing us to share expertise with the world. And, it just gives you the courage. I think you gain the courage to transform your wounds into wisdom that serves others and through this book.
Yes, if you allow yourself to get in the process. I fully agree.
Yeah, and you have to be willing to get into that process. I definitely understand what you mean by that. And well, it's been an honor to chat with you. I think you've offered some wonderful insights about your book and about the writing process. So again, everybody, if you are interested, you should go ahead and click on Amanda's links, check out more information about her and the books. I highly recommend it because, as Amanda mentioned, even if you're not grieving the loss of a loved one right now, of course, there's probably something else in your life that you are grieving that you could benefit from such guidance. So definitely check it out. The links are right there. Give it a shot. She has some amazing stuff. So yeah, it's been an honor to meet you. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much, Danielle. You're a fantastic host. I appreciate your time as well.
Well, thank you so much. You're very kind. And to all of our listeners, just, keep writing your story, keep building your expertise, and remember that the world needs what you have to offer. So go out there and write it, especially the parts of them that are forged in fire. You need to just do it, as Amanda has told us. So thanks again for joining us. I'm Danielle Hutchinson. This is Amanda McNeil, and we will see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.